Have you noticed throughout history, people that become rich and famous are often people that can speak confidently, clearly, and credibly?
Hi guys, okay, okay. Hi guys, today I'm very excited because I will be talking to one of the most versatile MC hosts and voice talents. It is none other than Wayne Chan. Welcome, Wayne, to the show.
Hi, Rio. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure, and I really look forward to speaking with you as well as sharing more tips about how you can be a good speaker with your audience.
It is very interesting that you took up this career, MC, right? Do you have a backstory to how did you actually enter into this industry?
I would say that I entered this industry quite by accident. It's not something that I planned to do when I graduated. I graduated from my university with a degree in public relations and journalism, and my dream as a graduate was always to work in a public relations agency or to be in a news organization, for example, in the Straits Times or Channel News Asia. The good news is I managed to do both of those things. I actually worked in public relations for many different companies, including government statutory boards, ministries, as well as private companies as well. And of course, I also spent some time in a public relations agency called O&M, or some of you might know it as Ogilvy. I also did some time in television. I joined Channel News Asia about a decade ago, and I spent a few years there as a television journalist, reading and reporting the news. However, in my time as a public relations professional, I started organizing lots of events. So as I started organizing events, I also had to call quotations and appoint event companies, as well as choose and select MCs to host our events. And when I did that, as I watched some of the MCs that I selected perform on stage and speak on stage, I realized that, hey, you know what? I think that is something that I could do as well. So that's how I started being interested in MCing. And after a while, after doing a few MCing gigs, I realized that's something that I was really capable of. And then I quit my job, and I haven't looked back ever since.
I always think that being an MC is about a gift thing, right? That they always have the gift of the gab. Is it something that only certain people can do, or is there certain skills that we can pick up in order to take up this particular career?
I would say that it can be both. First of all, something with regards to speaking is something that you can actually learn from a very young age. So people who actually grow up in families that has perhaps a very outspoken father, mother, uncle may have an advantage because you will learn some of these speech patterns from people that you grew up with. However, I would say that the three important skill sets that you need to have as an MC is, number one, you need to have confidence. That's the first thing that you definitely need as an MC. No matter how bad you sound, no matter how bad you look, have you ever noticed that you meet somebody at first, maybe you don't have a very strong impression of the person because when you look at the person visually, not very confidence inspiring, but from the way that the person speaks, presents themselves, the body language, right? That's something that convinces you. So confidence is something that I think is very key. The second thing that's very important to be a good MC, a good host, or a good speaker is credibility. You need to know your stuff. In terms of hosting, as an MC, the number one thing that I think will actually increase your credibility is your mastery of one spoken language, at least one. If you can have two, great. If you can have three, including dialects, fantastic. But whatever event that you're hosting in, you need to have mastery of one language. For me, the mastery would be English. And that it means your pronunciation, your grammar, your vocabulary, all right? All of this needs to be very strong. You also need to know how to use humor, okay? And of course, your tonality, all of it. So if you're somebody that is not strong in a certain language and you hope to become a speaker or MC, I would say that you need to polish up your mastery of that spoken language before you do so. Of course, Knowledge is also very important. All right, nothing is worse than having an empty vessel on stage. So you should have some general knowledge about the subject that you are talking about. So for example, if you are going to be hosting a conference to do with shipping or computing or whatever, you should actually have spent some time reading up about that industry to find out the latest news, the latest trends, what people are talking about before you go on stage. So this is something that I would say is very important. Your credibility needs to be there. The third thing that you need to know is clarity. It's another C, right? C for clarity. And this means being able to organize your thoughts well. I learned that when I was in a newsroom, because I was in a newsroom for about 3 years, and every night I would need to condense information that's announced by ministries, information that's announced by key spokespeople of organizations, breaking news, things that are happening very, very fast. For example, now if you're in COVID-19 situation, the latest measures being announced by the health ministry. If I'm reporting about the USA, what is happening with Trump? What is happening with the upcoming election? How does his performance right now affect his chances to be re-elected? I need to know some American politics, right? So all of this information needs to be condensed very, very quickly. You need to organize your thoughts very, very quickly. And with a news organization, or should I say, training in a newsroom, you get an advantage, because in a newsroom, you need to condense everything into 1.5 to maximum 3 minutes. So you need to condense all the news of the day into that very, very small package, very fast. All your pointers need to come out, and you need to have the lead or the headline pumping out really quickly. So once again, you need to be able to organize your thoughts very fast and figure out a way to present them in a manner that your audience can absorb quickly.
So it really brings to mind that Chinese saying, right? 1 minute on stage, actually, you have 10 years of training behind, right? Yeah, so it is not like I can just look good and stand on the stage and then yak just because I'm good at talking and I can become an MC the next day, right? Wow, there's really a lot of skills that needs to be acquired before you can really be a good MC. Of course, I know there are also those people who think just because they are able to crack a few jokes and they take up this particular job. But I don't think those will be able to last long. As for myself, I am very interested particularly in the ability to win the rapport with the audience quickly, because in my area of work, I talk a lot about storytelling as well. And it is key to effective persuasion and influence. So what are your tips in trying to win over the rapport of the audience very quickly in the beginning?
I would say one of the first things about winning rapport with audiences is understanding people. So if you want to know how to win rapport, you need to know how to read people very, very quickly. And the only way that you can do that is through lots and lots of practice. That means I would advise you to go to as many networking sessions, events, parties as possible, and put your skills to use, speaking to whoever that you can and trying to build connection, right? You will build a feel when somebody's connected to you, right? They'll be leaning a bit closer to you. They'll be looking in your eyes. You'll see the pupils dilating. They'll be smiling. They'll be displaying a lot of positive body language. The second thing that I would say is that before you meet someone, so for example, if I know that I'm going to meet you, Rio, right, for a meeting, it's the first time, I would actually do a little bit of what I call a social media stalking. I'll go to your Facebook page, I'll go to your LinkedIn, I'll try to look at your Instagram. If you have TikTok, I'll try to look over there as well and find out who exactly am I meeting. If I'm about to host an event, I would like to know who was the person that actually hosted the previous event, how did it go, where was it held, and I'll try to go onto the social media, the internet, to look at pictures of the previous event. If there's videos, even better. So then I will be able to know the audience. Of course, when I visit a person's office as well, for example, let's say I'm going to host an event for ABC company. When I go to ABC company, after speaking to the client, I would actually then walk around the office to look at the people inside the office to see who exactly they are. Probably spend about 5 minutes just walking around quietly and just looking around and seeing who is this audience that I'm speaking to. So this is a very, very important thing that you need to do to establish rapport. At an event itself, on event day, the other thing that I would do, or I advise people to do, is go early. Make yourself as comfortable with the venue as possible, right? Know where the toilet is, where's the smoking corner, where do guests register, Where do people find certain things that they may be looking for in an event? So you become like, really, really knowledgeable about the whole venue. You're like a master of your territory. Speak to people at the event as well, make yourself comfortable. So if let's say the event starts at 6, why not come at 4:30 p.m.? When a client sees you, they feel calmed down as well. Chat with them, chat with people who are coming into the room, have a few of them. I would say that you need to build a few supporters in the audience. This is something that is very important. And that is how you can actually establish rapport.
Really getting to know the people that you are going to talk to and probably establishing a common ground with some sort of common interest or common topics that you can bring up during your introduction, that will quickly enable people to be in your presence. Yeah, I think that's a good idea and a good tip. The other thing is what you mentioned just now, your time in CNA, that you need to turn around so quickly and be faster than anybody else. That got me thinking a little bit. MCs are always supposed to know how to think on their feet very quickly and be able to respond to situations. And we know that situations do occur, right? Do you have any advice on how we can have this quick response? What kind of tips do you have on that?
I would say that, one of the most important things is practice, and preparation, and lots of preparation. Think of all the what ifs that can happen at an event. What happens if the VIP arrives late? What happens if the video doesn't play? What happens if there's a problem with the key performance, And what happens if the performers arrive late, if their sound system fails, so on and so forth. 101 scenarios that can happen. You need to have a response for all of these scenarios. You need to have it all penned down and practiced in your mind. 101 ways to fill the dead air on the stage. The second thing, of course, is you need to know your program inside out, at the back of your head, to the point that you can actually recite all the things that you're supposed to do and say on the stage, even as you're cooking, even when you're doing something. Try and think through the whole program, look carefully at it, examine it, think, are there any loopholes? Are there any possible things that could happen at this particular juncture? And if it does happen, what is my response plan? The second thing that I would say, or truly as the third thing, I would say is that you actually need to have a lot of sleep. Really, really. There's nothing more important than resting well before you go on any stage, all right? Please do not try and go on stage with 4 to 5 hours of sleep. It's not advisable. At least have 8 hours of sleep. And in fact, if I have an event coming up, I try to sleep well and eat well at least 3 nights before. If I have an event in 2 weeks' time, I try to get the script at least 7 days before the event so I can prepare and do all this preparation that I mentioned. So in all these things automatically churning in your head, right? You don't have to think at all. When something jumps up and surprises you, you still have some, I would say, bandwidth for you to process that surprise. But if your mind's always trying to remember, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? What am I say? What am I supposed to say? If your mind's always processing all of that and getting worried about remembering what you're supposed to say, remembering your plan, then when something surprises you, you have no way to react. You just be thrown off. So you do need to actually kind of like automate everything already before you go on stage. I think this is something that's very important.
Yeah, that's a very good advice. It sounds to me like we need to be a pessimist during the preparation stage, but we need to be an optimist when we are on stage. Yeah, we need to think of all the possible problems that we will be facing during the preparation stage so that we are prepared for it.
Yeah, it's like that swan, the metaphor of the swan. The swan's like looking very graceful. It's like floating around, right, on the water, but underneath, like, it's just moving really, really fast, paddling really, really fast. So that's what I would say it is. It really is.
One of the famous saying that we always hear is the show must always go on, especially if it's live. And I realized, especially during the COVID season, there are many people that have been going live on Facebook, on Instagram, and so on. Everybody is just going live. So this would be a helpful advice for all of us, I suppose. When things goes wrong, I've been told that a lot of times the audience may not even know that things have gone wrong. But we know, right? And how do we then react? Or when the audience know that something has gone wrong, how do we recover from the boo-boo? What are your advice on that?
Sometimes some situations can be covered up, as in you can just gloss over it, pretend nothing happened, and just continue. And up next, we'd like to invite, you You just pretend nothing happened. But sometimes there are situations where there's no way you can cover it. It's very, very obvious. And when that happens, sometimes you need to be honest with the audience about what happened. Okay, just need to be absolutely honest and have a little bit of humor. So I give you a couple of examples. One example I had was I was hosting an annual dinner and dance for a bank. And the whole dinner was meant to start with the bank's senior management team coming on stage to dance. And there was going to be a very beautiful video that they created and produced to be played on an LED screen behind them. Unfortunately, at that event, the whole computer crashed and the whole place could not continue. You know, the lights had gone down, the management was supposed to go on stage, but they couldn't play the video. So during that time, what I did was I interviewed the management instead about how to prepare for this whole performance, what they did. And I said, no, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you your management has really, really rehearsed. They spent, hours and days just to put up this special performance for you. So you know what? I think what we need to do is give them a really, really big round of applause, cheer as loud as you can so we can actually encourage them to come on stage. So I find ways to fill the time. The second one that happened was very, very important 100th anniversary of a company. And what happened at this 100th anniversary is the dinner from the kitchen was not ready. I was working with a rather junior events coordinator who somehow had miscoordinated the delivery of the dinner into the ballroom. So after the CEO and the VIP made their speech, the natural thing for me to do was come on stage and, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, dinner is served, or something like that. So after I said that, I finished saying it, the junior coordinator ran up from the back of the room to me and said, Wayne, dinner not ready. Wow, it was really like, really a stunner. After I said dinner was going to be served, dinner was not ready. So what do I do now? Fortunately, my mind, moved really, really quickly. And I again decided to fill the time with an interview because it was the 100th anniversary. Some of the company's long-time serving staff were being honored. People who had served the company for 20, 25, or even 30 to 40 years. They started with the company from the very beginning. So I found some of their very, very senior staff to speak to. And then this is where I mentioned building rapport. Remember my earlier point? Building rapport was very important. So I actually had already interviewed some of these staff to speak to them to find out more about them before I introduced them on stage. So I knew some of the stories that these people could tell. So to fill the time, I said, ladies and gentlemen, our company has been through 100 years. Can you imagine how much change has happened over the past 100 years? The number of achievements we have made, the number of obstacles we have overcome. And you know what? Life is always full of twists and turns. You can always expect the unexpected. For example, I'm just going to call out the elephant in the room. You all know I just said dinner was going to be served, but dinner has somehow been delayed. So what do we do when something changes? When we have an unexpected change in circumstances or the environment? I'm sure some of our long-time serving staff, including Mr. So-and-so, who has been in the company for the past 40 years, can tell us how they managed to be resilient and overcome some of these obstacles to bring ABC company to where it is today. Now just go there and speak to him. That's how I actually fill the time. So you need to have all these kind of what I call response plans in place in your mind, and you need to turn very, very, very quickly. Once again, you need to prepare yourself very, very well for all circumstances and all situations.
For me, I've been doing a few YouTube videos already, and I realized that when I do my editing, I tend to use the ums and the rights in trying to fill the dead air, so to speak, while I'm thinking of what to say next. Is that something that we should consciously do something about it and avoid? And if so, what can we do to avoid it? Or can we just sound as if nothing is wrong and just continue the way we are doing it? What's your advice on that?
I would say that you actually have to be conscious of yourself in terms of what these are. These are what you call autofillers, things that you use to fill the air when your brain is still thinking up what to say next. And of course, some people would do the okay, all right. In Singapore, we like to say, okay, okay, all right, all right, all right. Right, they'll say it many, many times, throughout a sentence. And I remember I used to have a colleague, that liked to say this word called basically. Oh my goodness, he used to say this word so many times. It was to the point that whenever he was speaking to us, we would play a game and count how many basicallys, he would actually say inside the meeting. We actually write it down, and he had 3 versions of the basically. He had basically, that was one version. He had basically, with an R, basically, that's the second version. And here one more is basically, like queen, basically. So basically, and basically. He had three autofillers. It was so funny watching him doing that. Now, how can you combat that? I would say that you do need to actually watch yourself. If, of course, you already have some videos, watch your videos and watch out for the specific autofiller that you like to use and try to remove it. How do you remove it? Very, very simple. So instead of saying okay, or all right, try to pause and take a little bit of a breath. So for example, Rio, if I'm saying to you, one thing I want to tell you about cloud computing is that it is the way of the future. You see, I paused and I smiled, I took a little bit of a breath, and then I continued. I didn't do the So this breath actually makes you really very confident, right? When you just take a little bit of breath and you smile, you look very confident while you're thinking what to say next. So this is one way I would say you can deal with these autofillers.
A bit like we need to be comfortable with silence, I suppose.
You do. And the best way to do it is to practice. So if you have something that you want to say on stage, practice, record yourself and look out for those autofillers and replace it with a bit of a smile.
I always have that issue because I feel like I need to continue the sentence and not have any breaks in between, so I will tend to just continue without any full stop, so to speak. So therefore, when the sentence is not completed, I will need that filler. I will be very uncomfortable if I pause too long, because there was some feedback over the years that people told me that, Rio, you take too long with your thoughts. You speak very LOR-SOH, very long sentences, and you go on and on. So I try to speak faster in a way, but I can't because my brain is still thinking of what to say next, right? End up, I will always be using all these fillers. So that is a very helpful tip that I will really need to look into myself.
What you mentioned about going on for too long, this also has to do with how one organizes their thoughts. So if you're somebody that can organize your thoughts quickly, I think one of the ways you can do that is maybe practice writing down all your thoughts really, really quickly. How to write your thoughts into maybe a quick, what I call 20-second or 30-second elevator pitch, for anything you think about, the top headline and then 3 main points. Boom, boom, boom. If you keep practicing that way, you'll find that you become clearer in how you communicate.
Well, it seems like a lot of the skills that you have shared are very relevant to anyone interacting with people in person. Where can they pick up such skills?
I would say that there are many places on the internet that you can actually search to pick up public speaking skills. But the most important thing to really, really be a very good public speaker or to speak well is that you need a coach. You need someone to actually look at you and understand all the problems that you might have. I'll give you an example. When I joined Channel News Asia, I thought that I spoke very well, but I actually had some problems with the way I speak. For example, I had a problem with the TH sound. Them, they, their, three. The TH sound is something that a lot of Singaporeans would like to say with either an F or a D. For example, instead of saying them, they'll say them. Instead of saying there, they will say their something. But I had this problem when I joined Channel News Asia and I didn't know about it. And I had a speech coach, a trainer who watched how I was speaking, made me read a few lines of news and spotted all of these problems. So you actually do need a coach if you really, really want to go to a very professional level. You do need a coach to actually work with you and spot what your problems are and how you can actually present yourself much better. So yeah, you can actually give me a call. You can call me at 938. You can also find me on YouTube if you like. You can just search MC Wayne Chan. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. And of course, you can then send a private message to me on these social media platforms.
I'm glad that you are able to make use of that skill that you have and even offer this, because I think there are applications for these skills beyond just being an MC. Even when you want to do your Facebook Live, for example, or when you want to go and pitch your ideas to your customers and your clients, all these are very important presentation skills which you have shared that will be applicable for all these scenarios as well. So I think I will probably have to consider signing up for your coaching package as well, because like I said, it's only when I edit my own videos I realize I have all these issues, because before that I used to think that I'm pretty good at public speaking. I have hosted a couple of weddings for friends and I was pretty proud of myself. But when I sit down and look at my own videos, that's when all those moments where I'm like, oh my God, I didn't realize I have all these issues come up, right? So thanks a lot, Wayne. I think those are very helpful tips that you have shared today, and the fact that you are offering this coaching to people that might need it, I think it will be very, very useful.
The key takeaways.
With more people going live on social media like Facebook, Instagram, or even YouTube, I suppose many will begin to realize that public speaking, whether is it in front of a live audience or in front of the camera, is not so natural after all. People like Wayne has trained for many years and is still continuing to improve himself even today. How can we be better at this? Well, from today's sharing, I will distill it down to 2 P's. First of all, preparation, and secondly, practice. We need to know who we are talking to. We need to know the place that we are talking to them in. We need to know the topic, and we also need to know what could possibly go wrong. As for practice, it has always been practice, practice, practice. There's no end to it, really. And we need to find somebody that we can trust to point out to us the blind spots that we may not be aware of even. Either we can record ourselves and review it afterwards, or we can always get somebody who we trust in order to point out to us the mistakes so that we can improve ourselves. But at the end of the day, always remember that we must always strive for excellence and continue to improve each time, because there's no end to improving. So see you next time.